Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. Welcome back to the channel. My video on withdrawing from classes and taking a W grade has proven to be one of my most valuable and most watched videos to date. I think that's really awesome. I see the W grade as this really great tool for students who are in bad semesters or sticky situations. It can really help you out. And we'll talk more about that. The thing that's always puzzled me, however, from my time as a professor, is that universities actively seem to discourage the W grade. And I never really understood that until I sat down and tried to sketch out some of the reasons for maybe why these things are happening. Truth be told, I think that also explains some of the bad information that's out there about how the W grade works. So, what I want to do today for you as a student is make sure and explain what the W grade is, how it works, and what you can expect. But I also want you to understand some of the things happening behind the scenes at these universities so that you can understand why there's maybe some bad information out there at the local level about how the W grade works. And sadly enough, it doesn't really have anything to do with your education. It really has to do with the university's best interests. So, we got a lot to do today. What do you say we get started? I want to take a moment and make sure we're all on the same page about what a W grade is and how you get one. Now, withdrawing from a class and getting a W grade occurs when you drop after open registration has ended, but before the firm withdrawal deadline that your university has set for that particular semester. By the way, both of these dates will be on your university's academic calendar, which you can look up without any problem in a search engine. Now, open registration is easy. This is a period in which you can add and drop as many classes as you want, and nobody really cares. There's no track of it, it doesn't appear on your transcript ever. It's just everybody building their schedules. And believe me, people make tons and tons and tons of changes right up until that very final deadline, in fact. You can withdraw from classes during that period of time, and there'll be no record of it. After that passes, and it's usually right after the first week of classes, say like that Saturday or Sunday after the first week of classes, you start getting what's called a W grade. That means that you've withdrawn after the open registration has ended. At that point, too, you can't add any other classes. Now, there's also another deadline that's important here, and that's what's called the withdraw deadline. That's going to be later in the semester, probably getting closer to the end of the semester, but it varies by university, and you'll want to check to make sure. That withdraw deadline is a moment where you can withdraw from a class right up until that moment, and even sometimes get some of your tuition dollars back. But if you withdraw after that, you get what's called a WF grade, which is the equivalent of getting an F. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, personally, I find that withdrawals are a great scenario. It gives you a chance to withdraw from a class that maybe wasn't the right fit. Maybe you get in there and you say, hey, I'm not ready for this class. I'm not interested in this class. Or you find out from your advisor, I don't even need this class. Or if you're like me and you advised yourself and you had to withdraw from classes because you figured it out. Sorry, that's going off on a tangent. This is a great tool. Even you get in and you find that you're just with the wrong professor. I had a class like that where I was like, I'm a smart person, they're a smart person, but I can see our approaches to learning are not going to get along. So I withdrew from the class and retook it a different semester. Worked out just fine, and nobody knew until I just told you, but you can keep a secret, I know. There are some scenarios where withdrawals can be a problem, and we want to make sure that we don't fall into these traps. The first one is the WF, and that means that you weren't paying attention to that whole first thing that Dr. Maples was saying, and you dropped the class after the withdrawal deadline has passed. If you do that, you get a WF, which is the same as getting an F grade. That does count on your transcript. Guess what? If you dropped the class before that deadline, a W grade does not impact your transcript. Doesn't count as anything. It's like basically saying, yeah, they took this class, but they decided not to finish it. Pretty cool, huh? I know. That's why it's a great tool. That's why I don't even know why I have to make this video. Sorry. Moving forward. There's some other things that we got to think about here. Are you keeping your full-time status? If you withdraw from a class and you are at, say, 12 hours, which is the established sort of full-time number of classes for most universities in the United States, if they're using like the common 3 credit hour system, that can put you from 12 to now 9 hours. And if you're under 12 hours, that's a problem because now you might be considered a part-time student. And that can be an issue for everything from federal loans to scholarships to all sorts of other stuff. Maybe even having health insurance. If you're using your parents' health insurance, they might have a requirement that you be a full-time rather than part-time student. So that is a thing to be concerned about. In that situation, it might actually be fine to just stay in the class and retake it if you fail it in the future. You also want to make sure, too, that by withdrawing from a class, you're not impacting scholarships and student loans. I have found a really weird scenario in which state supported student loans, or even like they're sort of a grant program more than a loan because you don't have to pay it back. But the state grants have a requirement of like how many classes you can attempt. And a withdraw grade does count towards your total number of attempted hours. And the number of attempted allowed hours per grant really kind of varies. So it's hard for me to say that. But if you are withdrawing from a class and you're doing it more than like a couple of times, you probably want to check and make sure that that's not an issue. Beyond these things, withdrawals are awesome. And if you have questions about them, I'm always happy to answer them in the comments below. Universities, they don't see it the same way. I don't understand why. So I took some time to write it all out and really sit down and explain that to you. Because by explaining it to you, I guess I can explain it to myself. So we got the withdrawals set aside. Let's figure out why the universities are being so obtuse about this. Obtuse. That's a GRE word. Sorry, moving on. I know I have a lot of faculty who watch my videos. I'm looking at you. And they saw this phrase DFW rates on the slide and they're like, oh, because they know. They really do. Students have never heard of DFW rates. So what are they? DFW rates are a metric universities use to show they're doing a good job by basically comparing for every class, every semester, the breakdown of people who get an A, B, or a C in the class versus the people who get a D, F, and a W. Thing about this is in the university's eyes, a W is the same as a D or an F. Withdrawing from a class to them is the same as failure. And this is reason number one universities seem to actively discourage withdrawing from classes of late. The thing that concerns me about the DFW rate is I have seen it weaponized against faculty. I have seen faculty questioned, hey, why do you have so many people fail in this class? And in some cases, it's like, well, hey, this is organic chemistry. People are going to fail this class. That's just how it's going to be. People are going to withdraw because they're not ready for this class. In other cases, I've seen it come up at everything from like promotion boards and tenure boards to situations where people are like, hey, is this person a good teacher? Because we sure have a lot of people failing this class. And, it's like a 100 or 200 level class. What's the problem here? I mean, there can be very reasonable explanations for why people are failing those classes. They're not coming in with the skills. In fact, the university should be saying, what can we do to better prepare these students? Instead, they're simply saying, oh, don't let them withdraw. That's the same as a D or an F, right? We can see right away this useful tool for students is suddenly being made into a bad thing for faculty, for sure, and by the university, because it seems to make it look like they're not doing their job. The premise to them is that a W is the same as a D or an F. But that's not how it appears on your transcript as a student. It pops up as a W, and as long as you didn't get the WF, it does not impact your GPA. Next up is student loans. The bulk of students are taking student loans. There's a couple of things, however, here that are stuff that we need to think about. First off, as I mentioned previously in our conversation, if you withdraw from a class, you need to make sure you're not going down from full-time to part-time status if you have student loans. That can impact your ability to get student loans that will actually cover all of your tuition. And from a university's perspective, if you can't pay the bill, that's a problem. If you also, and this is a new thing, but if you take more than like a normal load of classes, which is usually like 18 or more hours, withdrawing down from like 18 to 15 can also create some issues. Now, when I was a student a long time ago, you could take as many hours as you wanted up to like, over, I think 21 required like professor approval and university approval and stuff like that. But you could take 18 hours without any problem. Nowadays, I'm seeing a lot of universities that say you can take 12 to 15 and be considered full-time. If you take 18, there's an extra fee that has to be paid. And again, if you go from 18 to 15 because you withdraw, now the university sort of has this weird conflict of interest because you withdrew from the class that, remember that metric, the DFW rate thing, they think is a bad deal, and now they're making less money off of it. And overall, the big issue here is that The W grade in the university's eyes creates a scenario where they're not bringing in as much tuition as they once did. And let's be honest, universities are being run more and more like businesses these days. So this one is more of what I think administrators at universities are thinking about rather than it actually being functionally true. Universities are increasingly interested in the bottom line. They are functioning more as businesses and less focused on actual student meaningful outcomes. And I sense from talking to administrators at other places that they want butts in seats. They understand that when you buy the ticket for the class, so to speak, you're paying tuition for it, and when you withdraw, you're taking that money back. In practice, I don't know that that's really the case because if you're full-time status, you're going from like 15 to 12, you probably didn't pay extra for that. Generally, you can take 12 and 15 hours and it's the exact same cost unless there's some sort of like, classroom fee. But I think they're probably seeing this as a matter of not having butts in seats. The class isn't full. They're not making full optimal money off of that particular classroom. Additionally, too, and this is just a hypothetical guess that I have, but I sense that they even see withdrawing as something that creates future loss because you withdrew from this class and we didn't get to fill that seat. And now you're going to take a class in the future, which is going to fill up another seat that we're not going to make the additional funds that we would have off. These are all hypothetical. These are from conversations with administrators and trying to sort of peer through their world versus my understanding as someone who was, solidly in the classroom and teaching and not working with dollar figures, but trying to, mold the minds of tomorrow's leaders, which I did. Actually, I did a pretty good job at that. I've got some amazing students. Wish I could talk about them, but that would be a FERPA violation. Nonetheless, universities want those dollars, and they see, I sense, withdrawals as a bit of a burden in making that money. Let's be honest, graduation rates are probably the biggest metric for any university to say we are doing our job. Now, in my experience, I've actually had faculty argue with me and my perspective on W's because they say this very line that taking a W delays graduation. Hypothetically, yeah, it could. There could be scenarios where taking a W may mean that you can't take this class again till the next year when they offer it. It could also mean that like maybe you don't get to take the class that followed the class that you withdrew from because you got to wait until you can take that other one. I get that. The thing is I don't know that it really applies at the university level. In my experience, universities are very fixated on fifth and sixth year seniors graduating. They want to know that within 5 years or within 6 years, we're getting you out the door. They're probably tracking the 4 year statistic as well, but the fifth and sixth are the two that I've worked with the most in my time as program coordinator. These were things that I had to report in our 5 year reports to say, hey, our major is doing what it needs to do. See, we're graduating people at the rate that we need to. So they want to know that you're graduating, and I sense that anything that could get in the way of that, such as a W, they see as being a problem. I think it's more in the hypothetical realm, though. Honestly, I see a W as a tool that can be used wisely by students. There may be a scenario where it causes you to now delay graduation a little bit. But honestly, if delaying graduation one semester is going to make you a more successful, brighter, and happier person with better mental health and all the different kinds of health that are important for us to be successful and happy and healthy, I think it's fine. I think we need to be centered on taking care of our students' best interests. I mean, I feel like that's been a huge part of my career is to make sure we take care of the students' best interests. It's not necessarily about what is best for the university, especially in this hypothetical realm that W's may be actually delaying things. So for me, I think it's fine. Even if you need to take the W and delay a little bit, it's probably a perfectly reasonable decision. And if you ever want someone that you can chat about that with, you can always leave me comments below. So there you have it. Dr. Maple's perspective on the W grade. It's a great tool. It's something that you need to be aware of. As with all tools, we need to know how to use it. We need to know the risks and situations where it may not be the right tool to use. But by and far, being able to drop out of classes that are not a good fit for you, that are not needed, that don't fulfill perfect purpose in your career or your major, or even just aren't the right time to take the class, that's what the withdrawal is for. It's there to help you with those scenarios. It's not going to impact your GPA if you get the W instead of the WF. It can be a situation for student loans and full-time, part-time status, but by and far, it is a great bet to make. If you have questions about withdrawing from a class, leave them in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer your questions. Likewise, if there's a video I can do for you in the future, let me know. I'm now actively recording new videos, so we'll hopefully have more on the way. That's all for today, folks. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.